Hello, everybody. Welcome to Everything in Moderation podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the current Ukraine-Russia debacle. I say current, but it's been going on for many years. It's been brewing, and that's something I've been following since I was a senior in high school or junior. So I'm a veteran of this, I guess.
I was a senior in high school, so I remember exactly what had happened.
Yeah.
I guess where to start off, I'll kind of just give a little very dumbed down timeline of how this all kind of happened. So this all sort of started when there was a student protest in Kiev, Ukraine, and it was called the Euro Maidan because these students were advocating for Ukraine to turn into more of a European country, and they were also seeking entrance into the EU. Top government wasn't really too keen on that. They wanted to preserve their relations with Russia more. And this sort of led to like a bunch of riots, some crazy videos on YouTube of like police being set on fire and a bunch of that. It was wild. So what happened is the acting president at that time stepped down, or well, technically he had to flee because of safety concerns. And then there was sort of proof that he was a Russian puppet, but that was, who knows. And then after that, there was some skirmishes and battles in the east of Ukraine, which I think, it would be helpful to kind of bring up a map to explain the dynamic of Ukraine and why a lot of this is happening, because there's a geographical sort of answer to this too. Danny, do I have permission to share?
I mean, I think you do since you're the host.
No.
Unless you made me the host.
I
Okay.
made you the host, yeah.
That's funny. Doesn't even give you permission when you transfer to me. Let's see here. Yeah, now you can be host. Just one thing I want to bring up real quick too, about Ukraine. A lot of their exports look exactly like Russia, and I think it will bring me back to a bigger topic later on. The fact that their economy almost operates exactly like Russia's, except they have more like open capitalist structure compared to Russia's like oligopolies. They have many oligopolies in their market.
So looking at the map right here, there's some language differences that you could immediately point out, and it's totally based on geography. Obviously, right here, they're close to Poland. City of Lviv was actually taken from Poland many years ago. So that city, you'll hear a lot of Polish speaking, but also Ukrainian speakers. And then just in general on this side, West Ukraine, mostly Ukrainian speakers. But once you pass the Dnieper River, you will most always hear Russian.
But the difference between Russian and Ukrainian is very minute. Very minute.
I mean,
it's like an accent thing.
It depends on the area, I would say, in Ukraine. Because, like, for example, I have a friend named Peter Malna who lived in Ukraine, and I think he lived like over almost near the Poland side. I couldn't even say what country it is, but he does not give a shit about like Ukraine. He lived over there, and the reason why he says is like it's pretty crazy and it's split. That's what he says. It's just that it's just not a really good environment to be in, and a lot of people are on different sides of the equation. So a lot of people, like probably the older folks, liked the how it used to be in the Soviet Union, and then all the newer kids are like, fuck this shit. We don't want this shit anymore, since they never lived in that.
Hence why it was mostly students who were in charge of that protest with the Euro Maidan, right? And to Mike's point, yeah, the grammar and words they have a lot that cross over, as do many of these post-Soviet countries, right?
Yeah, Belarus, definitely. Ukraine, yes.
Ukraine does sound more like Polish if you like listen to the cadence and the way that they speak. So linguistically, that's a difference. It sounds more like a European language, whereas Russian, you know that it's definitely more of an Eastern language. It's more rough. It's more tough. But so
right,
then
I guess. But
yeah,
you have to be around it long enough to understand. Like I'm Russian, so and I can identify the dialect and I can tell the difference between all the different ones.
mm-hmm. And most of those skirmishes that I talked about were happening around this region of Donetsk and Luhansk. And then, as you can see, Crimea right here is in red because that was annexed in 2016, I believe. Bunch of Russian soldiers went in there, and everyone that had a Ukrainian passport there turned it in. They got a Russian passport. Bridge was built right here, and I think Putin had like a big parade kind of thing to celebrate Crimea's return to Russia. That was Danny. I know you like the economic stuff, so that is a strategic point, geographically situated right on the Black Sea. It's the biggest harbor in Ukraine. All the exports, imports, and stuff are there. So it was a big blow to Ukraine economically too. That's my shtick.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing what I don't get, and it is a question that's bothering me, and I still can't get itched off. Why is Putin posturing like this? Especially in like, at least I'm just going to say it. There's no good situation that comes out of it for him or his country. Even if he takes Ukraine with no like any backing from, like, say if the United States did nothing, it did not sanction them more, which we already sanctioning them. Say we did nothing, they couldn't economically take Ukraine. It would be like us going into Afghanistan being like, okay, this is our territory now. This is becoming our country, right? It wouldn't really work. I mean, maybe America could make it work because we have 24 billion in GDP, and we could probably like set up a nation like that. But like, you think Russia has 1.5% like part of the GDP of the entire economy of the world, which is 11th in they're right behind Brazil. You think Canada can go take like a country in like some random other state? Because they're 10. And that's my point. It doesn't work out economically for them to even take Ukraine, especially with the resistance that's going to happen. Because there's going to be resistance groups no matter what. And you don't think the U.S. is going to fund that? Of course they do. They do it for South American states. And it's just this meta war that keeps on going on. And it happens within China, except in China, it's more over like we can see what minerals they're fighting over, like lithium and stuff like that, and all of the regions in like Uganda. So
there's numerous reasons. Number one, I think the main factor is, going off of you saying there's no good outcome of this. At this point, I think it's just Putin trying to reinvigorate his falling popularity at home. He's trying to still show he's a strong leader. Second of all, he has personal reasons to be doing this, because there's a lot of like research and documents from past. I mean, as you know, he was in the KGB as a young man just coming up, and then after the fall of the Soviet Union, he climbed his way up politically. I believe in 2005, he gave a speech. I forget what the circumstance of it was, but he took, as best I can quote, is that he said the fall of the Soviet Union was probably the greatest tragedy of the century for them. And he has he gave like this very, I want to say like kind of romantic, poetic take on
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, Russians and Ukrainians are like this. They're one and the same, because if you know Russia's history, they started the same time, same area. Like they're the same people essentially. They're just
like in the Ukraine's capital, Kiev, was actually where like the Vikings came, and it was Kiev and Rus. That was where it was originally situated, but then eventually they moved more after like wars and stuff. It was more desirable.
Right.
I think that was a really good
There's
point.
a very
by the way,
strong
Mike.
history there. And so obviously, like, there are a lot of Russians who have the sense of like a lot of Ukrainians and a lot of Russians see each other. They see each other's brothers. So it's a very close relationship. It's like Germans and Austrians. You know, it's the same thing like there. They speak the same essentially, but yeah, they have slightly differences in culture, but they're interchangeable.
I do think it's like Putin's like will though, right? I feel like he really wants Ukraine personally. Like this is personal. Like he ain't coming like.
I'd agree. There's a personal take to it, but I also don't think he's that stupid enough to actually start a full-on war, because again, it's the US will back up whoever the hell challenges Putin, and also, you know, two nuclear powers going at each other. It's Cold War shit all over again. So
I mean, you sort of see that already too, because I know US or NATO, they were sending weapons to the pro-Ukraine military groups, right? Not even just the Ukrainian army, but like literally
they're giving them javelins, dude. From
they're giving them anti-tank javelins to
and Russia is funding the pro-Russia Ukrainian rebels, right? The separatists. So very, very clearly you could see how it could maybe boil to this point that we're at now.
I don't think it's going to get any worse. It makes no sense for either side. Again, I'm definitely not pro Putin, but I have to give it to him. I don't think he's not an idiot. He's not an idiot in the sense to risk destroying his own country for this.
So I have a question for everybody here, because this is something that I pay attention to, at least, and we always talk about like media, the media on this podcast, right? Being media of ourselves, but we discussed how, well, I mean, I think I brought up a couple weeks ago in the Discord how all this bad talk about China has gone away now that Russia has entered the fold here, right? And Russia even said that they were not going to invade. What their actions and saying what they do are two totally different things. I understand that. But do you think that there's elements of US propaganda in this too, a little bit?
Yes.
Definitely.
How's that?
If I were just giving like it, just look at it, right? Well, why do you think that we said that, you know, they're an imminent attack, draw everybody out of the embassy? It's because we're definitely, it's really like chess. It's like chess almost. It's like putting your piece back and being like, guess what? If you freaking make a move that I know about that you're gonna happen, I'm gonna bust you open. And they know how to meta war. So we are so good at meta warring, it's nuts. So like our entire military is set up specifically for that. I mean, like if you look where our military is, look where our army is like in just random bases, just sitting there, just because they're logistics. They're literally the people that go deliver the arms and stuff to who? The special forces. What do the special forces do? Oh, well, they can they train militias in different countries. They go do, you know, guerrilla wars against their leaders. Okay, and then we have like
years. That's a U.S. staple of doing that kind of shit.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like we are so good at this that this is just an average play by, especially Russia. I think a lot of people like think Russia is what it was in the 70s and 80s. Back then, they were actual direct competitors of the United States. Right. Nowadays, it's 2020. Russia is like not doing very good economically, especially compared to like even nations that we consider a joke. You know what I mean? Like Brazil. I don't think a lot of people, I think there's a meme going around like, I don't want to go to Brazil. Well, guess what? Brazil has like two points above, you know.
I know the meme you're talking about. It's I've seen it's guess what? What, you're going to Brazil? No, or whatever. Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Like it doesn't make sense. And you know, I have to go back to but I don't know what's gonna happen. Mostly because I think that, and I really do believe that Russia has been in a mistake economy for about 40 years. It's because they've never fixed the biggest issue in their economy, and that we knew like almost right away, right? Is that oligopolies in specific just local markets do not work.
But oligopolies come from Russia did a straight injection of capitalism because they had to make quick moves after the Soviet Union fell. So they did this thing called a shock therapy or shock injection. is the term for it, where it's just straight 100% free market, whatever that means, capitalism, and that was the spark that allowed oligopolies to pop up so fast.
I want to add, like, I personally don't agree with like the shock therapy, because I don't think that, that kind of helped them flourish. I think that kind of might have backset them, as if they kind of,
It definitely did.
yeah, as if they kind of moved forward, so.
That's the way you could look at China as an example of how they sort of did it better. They scaled it up gradually. And I know, Danny, we always talk about how China regulates before they innovate. That's sort of what they did. And even when they opened up in the 70s, right? They didn't immediately give free range to everybody, right? Farmers were gradually given more land. They're returning more to their agrarian centered economy. And then eventually everything else popped up later.
Yeah, the United States found this out the hard way. I mean, there was a time where we were setting up economies like this. So, like, if you were to think back towards the Wild West era, like over towards the 1900s, our economy pretty much went bankrupt in the 20s leading up for that time, because our economies, when they were localized, operated like oligopolies. The problem with absolute free market, just like directive in the government, is that a free market allows for anything. So say if a culture of a local market's like, okay, we're mafia time control prices, it's not free market capitalism at that point. And free market capitalism is the most efficient way to get a ton of money. Now, why is that? Because there's more competition, and there's more people and more companies producing wealth. So in an oligopoly, you move players out of the market, thus even putting prices up, and then the people, or the people that are going to go spend money and stimulate the economy can have to spend less, just because prices are more expensive. So in this way, Russia's messing up still, but we've done the same thing in America, and it's led us to absolute catastrophe, like it has for Russia now. Not saying that they can go reverse from this directive, but it's really instilled within their culture at this point, because it was kind of that's back in the Soviet Union, that's kind of how it was operating as well, just in a an actual like controlled by the government sense. Like it now it's more over like local market, like people and operators, and especially all the oligarchs of Russia, but back then it was central down. So I think that's the only difference between their economy then and now.
Yeah, and the population was a lot more satisfied back then, and a lot more happy. And they definitely now, regardless.
I feel like that's where you get like a lot of old people like saying that was a good thing. That's why like in Cuba you'll see the same thing. It's better than it is today, and that's part because of what America has done to those countries. You know what I mean?
Definitely. That's something that's not talked about enough, is America's influence on why things are the way in Eastern Europe and post-Soviet Europe now. America had a huge hand in that, in destroying from the inside out all their economies.
Yeah. So just real quick, let's talk about the reason why Russia's economy is, especially in the state that it is coming in the last decade. So in 2014, oil prices just completely fell down to the floor, right? And when that happened, their GDP tanked. And what the United States did? They sanctioned them more, because it was in the time that, they were initially dealing with Ukraine and them and that conflict. So the United States just capitalized on the opportunity and crushed them. That's why they're in that level, this level today. So we as Americans, we don't see that, and our country doesn't talk about that, right? But you have to understand that when states interact with each other, especially hegemonic powers, they're going to assert their influence on actors that they deem as competition or their enemy, until they can't. Like China, how much can we sanction them? We'll be destroyed. Why? Because China produces everything for us, to give or take. We're the consumer economy. They produce, and they're turning into a consumer economy too. So that'll be very interesting when everything's made in China and they can go, buy all those goods and stimulate their own economy. I wonder what will happen then. When hegemonic powers shift, they will assert their power on one another, And who knows? Maybe we won't be number one, and then China's going to be everywhere in our, cultural world.
Yeah, Danny, I just want to bring up that's a really good point because I had a quote that I wanted you guys to read from this article. So the relationship may be the closest the two nations have been since the 1950s honeymoon that followed China's fight against U.S. and allied forces in the Korean War. And I think that literally shows how like China is cozying up with Russia, even if it's just news channels and propaganda. But like even at the Olympics, you see them like Xi Jinping and Putin really close together, and I feel like that's really showing like kind of like a standoff to the U.S. And this is talking about hegemonic powers like shifting and seeing how that plays.
Yeah, I mean, China also produces a lot of Russia's stuff as well. Their
Right.
Transactional history is pretty interesting. Like China gets a lot of their wheat from them, for example. So like they have deep roots with each other. But I would say that China, and I say they it's very weird because you don't really see this a lot. China acts like this guy in the back corner that's selling you everything, but ain't telling you anything about their business and just leaves you alone until they don't have to, or have to go do something to you. They don't like starting like a lot of conflicts, especially nowadays. You know what I mean? They just kind of like hover there and they're like, okay, we'll sell you shit. They're like the merchant country, and
I think
that
they
served them
realize,
very well.
yeah, I think that they realize that there's nothing to gain like through conflict. And also their record does not favor them historically because they've lost almost every war or battle like they've been part of.
Well, I mean, not everyone. I think the only ones I can think of off the top of my head is they're helping the North Vietnamese during the Vietnam War. They provided troops and weapons, and then the Korean War.
They actually fought in Vietnam too. Like they had
there was Chinese soldiers in North Vietnam to aid the NVA.
But the sort of funny thing that like I'm kind of referencing here is that like China has only won wars against itself, like in terms of upheaving their old governments, old regimes, whatever. Like it's just like it's a civil war country. It's been that way for millennia, right? But now I think it's pretty steady, I suppose. But
as of 1949, it's been incredibly perfectly steady.
Yeah. China, I would say, is a very weird scenario in that in 40 years, they brought a huge portion of their country out of abstract poverty. And that doesn't just happen, like how long did it take us to get out of abstract poverty? Probably a similar time. Like, and what America turned into. The biggest.
Which period are you talking about for China?
So like, I'm talking about when their basically the communist structure ended and they started opening up their economy for investing. So during that time, 70s. Around the 70s. So I guess that was 50 years then, isn't it? But like around that time, they were doing a lot of ideas and they were just basically just copying whatever we had and then leaving out all the shitty stuff as well. So like they saw what we did in the 50s with FDR. It's like, okay, wait a minute, demand side economics works pretty well, but we also have to control our debt levels. And then they saw that from Reagan because they realized that all this cutting of federal revenue isn't doing us very well when it comes to our our budget, our balance sheet.
I think you're just overcomplicating it. It's they did was they still had the government quotas, say out in the farms. You had your quotas, and then whatever extra you had, you can sell. That's it.
I'm talking about when they opened their VIE structure. This is when, so like someone like, say if I like had owned $1 billion over here in America and I wanted to get in on some Chinese business, I could do that now and I can invest in China. And that gave them a huge leg up because they were a producer economy. So then they could go and be like, oh, we're going to be the lowest cost provider ever, period. And that's what they've been doing for, as long as I can remember. I mean, go look at like half your clothing. Go look at literally anything that you own. I guarantee you half of it will be from China and the other half will be from Taiwan or Vietnam. You know, any real like producer economy, because these are economies that rely on that. That's why in America it's very weird, because we live in the opposite of that. And you know, we do, you know, produce things, you know, but not in the same way that China does.
So do we think that China will aid Russia in going forward in this issue specifically?
I would say yes.
Really? Why would they do that though? That's my question.
Well, why are they
And
buddying
how?
each other right now?
No, I'm saying like how and why?
How? Maybe weapons. Even though I'm sure Russia
Okay.
doesn't need any more weapons, they have plenty. Something along with supplies, maybe something
I
for the
could see
military.
that. I could see that. Supplies definitely, but like that's the thing. Like China does that already everywhere. Like China's the only other actor that knows how to do this meta world chess like we do in the United States. That's why we're actively fighting them in Africa, just through other, you know, other professionals. They have a military that operates similar to us. Like China is amazing in the fact they just really copy and pasted the entire country and removed the free speech part and then just did it. And then now they're here, right? And we have to compete with them because they own 15% of you know, the world's GDP, and they are only growing and growing and growing. So they are this beast that, you know, America is, you know, finding hard to control. So, you know, I guess you could see them go and, you know, try to aid Russia, but I don't think they really care about that. I think they more care about, you know, themselves. And, you know, why would they get involved in a conflict that if they start aiding Russia, what happens if the US gets president and they're like, oh, let's go sanction them because they're helping Russia?
Since we only have 10 minutes left, we should go back to the Russia-Ukraine part and forget about China for right now.
Okay.
Yeah. So, something I wanted to mention as well. Another reason for this is I'm speaking on, I guess, from the Russian perspective. What was that?
Don't worry, that was me. My bad.
All right. From the Russian perspective, so obviously Russia sees you. First of all, aside from Russia and Ukraine having this history together, they want to stay friendly with each other. Putin and most Russians will see the encroachment of NATO. First of all, NATO. The whole reason NATO exists is just to be anti-Russia. That's it. That's its whole fucking purpose. And even after the Cold War, there's really, NATO's been looking for a new purpose essentially, and now with this new conflict or this encroachment in Europe, they're looking for a. I think they're going to find a new purpose. But Russia sees if Ukraine joins NATO, they're going to have, you know, the U.S. and obviously other NATO countries will use that as a forward operating base, pointing guns right at them, which from the Russian perspective is a threat to their personal security. So I can see why they want to do everything they can to keep Ukraine out of NATO, and I agree with that. There's the whole concept of, you know, NATO staying out. I totally get that.
That was too. They were supposed to do that. Gorbachev had a bill ready and signed, but you know, no American came to the table then.
But yeah, well, maybe it should have been taken care of back then.
I just think Putin want any more United States influence, and when you think of NATO, like you automatically have to assume it's United States influence.
It is. They control everything. They control NATO.
And another thing that I wanted to point out of like the timing of all this, because this has been something that's been leading up, but I think that Putin's really trying to take advantage of Ukraine's like failure in its personal economics, because the country hasn't been doing well since the Soviet Union fell. You have other countries who have gone up in their GDPs while Ukraine has only declined. So I think that has a big factor to do with why we're here right now at this moment, you know? So I think that it is possible. I personally think that, you know, there could be an invasion. So
well, yeah, and Putin he just wants to assert his regional sovereignty over the ex-Soviet countries. I find that totally understandable. Again, I'm not pro-Putin, but I get it. Speaking from a Russian perspective, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that confounds me within this argument, like this thing that's happening, is just why is Putin doing it? And because every single angle I see is just bad, especially from an economic position.
Yeah.
And then it's funny you mentioned Ukraine and it doing bad. Yeah, definitely. And one of the reasons why is because when you see an economy separate from what it once was in, right? The economic environment whence it came from doesn't know really how to operate for a couple of years, and that's what happens. And Ukraine also, they sell a lot of, or like they export a lot of other things that Russia doesn't, like steel, for example.
Not to mention black market cigarettes, but that's the second point.
But like it's just another resource for them. And even then it doesn't pay for the bill that's going to cost them. I mean, like, let's say Russia's GDP right now every year is an average of $1.5 trillion. Now we just spent that on a package, I'm pretty sure, recently in Congress. We said that was a watered down bill. So, and this is the like kind of like situation we're playing with here, and we need to kind of understand that and take Russia for what it is, in that it's not really a powerful player anymore, and America has a big hold on Russia, and it has been having this grasp on the country for a while now. And I don't think they're rational
right,
actors anymore. I don't think that's right. And here's the thing. I think that us doing this creates irrational actors. Look at Kim Jong-un. That dude, we say he's crazy. He's nuts. And he kind of is. This country's kind of nuts, right? But like, look at his situation. The reason why he's nuclearized is the last dictator that was insane like him, Gaddafi, got, axed, something.
He gave up his nukes. As soon as he gave up his
nukes, gone. And that's the thing. They're worried. These countries are worried. And this is the game we need to look at, especially from a game theory perspective. In that you see all these countries worried about this hegemonic power that's dying, that's going crazy and trying to control everything before it dies, and China rises up. And, I don't think this is going to happen, in the next 50 years, honestly, because I don't think China's economy is ready to take on America's economy. But it's still going to happen. Same thing of India, like taking over. You just see the economic wealth transfer every year. It happens slowly, but it happens surely.
So I kind of have one last thing to close on. It could be a quick question, but part of the large support from the Ukrainian perspective, from the Ukrainian side, right, has been far right ultra nationalists, basically Nazis.
They are Nazis. They literally are Nazis.
No, I'm like there's sects and there's groups that are aiding the Ukrainian military.
Nazi adjacent then.
Yeah, so they're aiding the military as basically like a paramilitary group, right? What do we think of that?
It wouldn't be stylish for the American military not to aid fascists. It would just wouldn't be, because at this point we do it every 2 seconds. If it wasn't fascism, why are we doing it? That's the easiest way. Look,
I gave you the alley-oop for that one.
That was so easy.
If that's the case, then Russia has every right to fight against them. Hello, historically speaking.
Yeah, but it's not rational for them to fight them, because what happens on a meta wars perspective? Now they're fighting Ukraine and spending trillions of dollars, right? Meta fighting America through this country that like is part them, and then funded through fascists, and now they are in territory for them to do it, because that's what I'm saying.
I also think that those groups are Ukraine's responsibility, because I don't see them going into Russia like making terrorist attacks, right? That would be a different story, right? If that, like, the Chechen war was the Islamic aggression from Chechnya, right? And then the Russia and the all that. And such. So that obviously, and that was within Russia, so Russia had every right to curb them, right? But not necessarily in this sense, just because they're far right ultra nationalists, right? That's more something that Ukraine should curb themselves, not like what I would want to see is the Ukrainian military like actively saying like just go home, like stop. You're like, this is making us look worse by you helping us.
There's a long conversation to have about that. I don't know if we have time though.
No, we have 1 minute and 48 seconds.
So strict with these time constraints, man.
Zoom's got to make their money, I guess. All right, we'll close on that. Thanks, Mike, for coming in on all Russia related topics. We'll be sure to call you.
Yeah, please. Yeah, I'm your guy. I appreciate it. Thank you guys.
Yep, and we'll keep this monitored. As always, when stuff like this happens, we'll give more regular episode updates. But I think next week our podcast is going to the issue of Canada and their freedom convoy. So we could talk about that next week. So look forward to that.
The wannabe Confederates waving Confederate flags from their truck. I might add. What a bunch of.
We'll be sure to hash out all that stuff next week. But for now, everyone else, have a great week. Enjoy. Stay warm if you don't have the blessings to be in a warm state or country at the moment. But that's us at Everything in Moderation going out. See you.